So hi, you're back with Tony V from Healing Art, or Art That Can Potentially Heal You. So this is video 3, and in video 3 we're talking about the multidimensional aspects of humans and how they access these different dimensions. And in this video we're covering dimension 3 and dimension 4. Now, dimension 3 and 4 are quite amazing in their own right, in as much that they are both conscious and unconscious at the same time. So you go, wow, how does that work? Yeah. So look, our third dimensional self is the part of us where most of us sort of think that life exists, and beyond the third dimension we don't really have any awareness of at all. As I said, with the first dimension and the second dimension, they're sort of primarily unconscious to us, so we never really think about them. Now, the third and the fourth are similar, but for most people, their awake time, the time when they are physically awake, the time they're aware of, is the time that they think that all that exists in that time frame. So it's a bit like I said at the beginning when I introduced multidimensionality, that we tend to have channel 3 turned on, and the other channels we can sort of be open to the fact that they're operational, but we're not connected to them, so we're not aware of them. Yeah. So I call this a little bit like humans wearing blinkers. So, you know, they put blinkers on a horse so that he only sees what's in front of him, so that it keeps him calm and stops him getting fearful. So if he was open up and he saw everything, he may be fearful of the things that are outside here. So they put blinkers on so he focuses on only one thing. So the analogy here is that most humans think of the third dimension. They don't even think about it's dimensional, of course. They've got blinkers on and they think that what they see in front of them is all there is to see. But of course, is it possible that stuff's going on outside of these blinkers that we're wearing? So our blinkered us is what we call our third dimensional stuff. Now, this third dimensional part of us is, you know, it's alive. Yeah, it's alive, and it experiences, you know, in human time frame stuff, it experiences a 24-hour day. Yeah? Now, what happens in our 24-hour day is that we basically are awake for around 2/3 of that time. So we stay awake for about 16 hours a day. And then for the other 8 hours, we basically go to sleep, because our physical body needs to sort of rejuvenate and regenerate, and it gets tired. Yeah. So, you know, all this stuff's happened in the day, and we put loads of things past our lips, and our body needs some downtime to rest and, as I say, rejuvenate and sort itself out, so to speak. Yeah. And this is our sleep time. So when the fact that we're conscious and unconscious at the same time is really quite weird. Yeah. But this is how it works. So our conscious world, our sort of 16 hours a day, is our third dimensional self. And when we're awake in the third dimension, that's it. This is like our life as we perceive it. Yeah. But when we go to sleep, our sort of like physicality part of us shuts down. So in other words, our third dimensional self becomes unconscious. But what do we all do when we go to sleep? Well, we tend to dream. Yeah. Now this dream time tends to get completely deleted, but this is actually our fourth dimensional self. And actually, if we think of ourselves in the context of mind, body and spirit, then in a sense, this fourth dimensional part of us is the spiritual part of us. Yeah, the first spiritual part of us, just knocking me out, the spiritual part of us, whereas the third dimension and the first and the second are our physical part of ourselves. Yeah, so fourth dimension is spiritual, first, second and third are the physical part of us. Yeah. So we've got this sort of divide where this part of us that's spiritual is operational when we physically are asleep. Now that's really quite interesting, isn't it? So the third dimensional world is the world where we experience our egoic self or not. Yeah. Now I'm definitely going to cover that in a separate video, because it's quite a big subject all in its own right. But if we think about how, for the most part, most humans are living what we call an egoic experience, and that is not the real them. this part of us that is our egoic representative is not the real us. It's sort of like a programmed us, it's a learned us, it's a fearful us, and that's why I'm going to deal with it in a separate video. But for most people, their third dimensional experiences is an egoic one which has some level of fear in it. Now, remember, your ego lives in the second dimension, and your ego, if it's on guard, if it's like operational, it sort of basically runs on fear, and we're fearing things that may or may not be real. So this could be like illusionary fear. But anyway, as I say, I'm going to cover that more in the separate video, because it's a big subject, your ego, and how does that all work. But in simple terms, most people are having this sort of blinkered experience where they think that what they see in front of their eyes is all there is. Now, if we were to wake up to the fact that our sleep time is actually real time, in other words, we're waking up and become conscious in the fourth dimension when we're asleep, this can be quite a revelation. In other words, we could ask ourselves, so I am actually a 24/7 creature. I'm not a 16-hour-a-day creature. I'm a 24/7 creature. What could I learn from this dream part of myself? And for the most part, people, as I say, just delete their dreams. Now, you could read a load of books about dreams and what they mean and their interpretations, and I'm all good with that. And if we're going to learn something quickly, then actually, and we're going to get some benefit, and how could we sort of like start to heal ourselves just with this simple knowledge that we're third and fourth dimensional, either conscious or unconscious. We're either awake in the third dimension and conscious, or we're asleep in the third dimension, unconscious in the third dimension, and when we like that, we're awake and conscious in a fourth dimension. Now, so let's just talk quickly about the fourth dimension. This fourth dimension is separated into different zones. There are 7 zones altogether. And the first zone is it's sort of called the darker zone. So some of our darker energies, a bit like when you have a bad dream, then that part of us is the part of the fourth dimension that we're like living in, So the darker energy stuff, Our fear can manifest in this part of us, and it's awake in that time when we're actually, technically, our physical body is asleep, So in here, sometimes there's a bit of healing that can happen in here once you become aware that some of your pain is residing in this part of us. And another big chunk of your pain is residing in the second dimensional part of us, and another chunk in the mineral part of us, Now, we're experiencing all this pain in the third dimensional part of us, but actually it's going on in these other parts of us, which until now, potentially, maybe you weren't even aware you had, So, that's the most important thing really about the fourth dimension, is there's this sort of darker part of us that lives there, But there are these other bits which are known as, like, you've got things like the spiritual plane is living in there. You've got the emotional plane. Some of your emotionality stored there gives us clues. You've got a physical plane. You've got a mental plane. You've got a causal plane. These are all things that we don't really need to learn about in detail, but if we understand some of the basics, we can start to see how we can use the art to heal some of these darker parts of us in a very simple way. So really, that's it from me about the third and the fourth dimension. I'm back in the next video. We'll be talking about the fifth dimension and what that really means. So I'll see you then. Bye for now.